should be apologizing for having freed itself up out of slavery and owing like the French government so much money. And I'm like, just like, I'm like, and queer people are apologizing because what? Because we're out? Like, are we apologizing about that? Are we apologizing because like your kids are looking at us weird? Like, because some people don't pass? Like, what is the real choice? Like, having to make about, like, what is it that we believe about our self-determination? And what are we willing to do for that? And what are we willing to sort of believe about ourselves and each other based on that? And I think having to make I think we're at the point, where like pride isn't enough. Like pride is fun. Like who doesn't love pride? I love pride. And we have too many of our members saving their money year round. I mean, working class people making, minimum wage, like saving money like from year to year so they can go be in one space where they're validated and they feel attractive and beautiful one time a year, whether it's regular pride or whether it's Black pride or whether it's Latino pride. And I'm like, that's the tragic thing, that like no one talks about that. I'm like, a lot of us, like, we did that for years. Like we saved money, like as a working class person for years, so we could go be like one weekend out of the year, like Labor Day weekend. And that could be like we could see ourselves reflected back in each other. And I think we're just a point of real reflection about that and a real accountability, I think, about that. Like, like how do we form communities when like that's what the whole economic infrastructure of our community is built around. It's around social spaces often, and having to make a real distinction on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And I think, it's also about what are ways that we engage deeply in what this work looks like. I mean, I think that's where the spiritual question and the political question are one, right? I want to be part of a movement where we are conscious. We are coming to full consciousness. I want to see us engage deeply with the questions of that the world exists outside of the United States, with the questions of homophobia, with the questions of racism, like, and to bring people to full consciousness means that there is pain, because we're conscious of the level of oppression that people are living with. But I would rather see us engage deeply, see who we are and say, I see what I am. I like what I see. I see what you are. I like what I see. And I think it's really about where we throw our lot in, Are we throwing it in with each other, or are we throwing it in with what we'll never be part of? And that, I think, has been the heartbreak of watching a history of homophobia play out in communities that I'm not disconnected from, people that I love, people that I cherish, people I have so much respect for. Every day making that decision, it's like banging up against a wall, looking for validation from something we're not going to be, and how we're really working to transform that, and the amazing possibility that holds for doing things potentially different. We have a board member, Stephanie Gillia, who often says, I believe homosexuals are dangerous. And I think what she means by that is taking a look at how the right talks about us and then thinking, but what are we really dangerous to? For example, the way we organize our families can be very dangerous to a capitalist system where the end point, the goal is buy a lot of stuff, get a suburban house, have 2.5 kids, right? There's a reason the system wants us to organize families that way. And queer people have never been doing it that way. We have all kinds of kinship networks that are outside of blood relationships. We have all kinds of ways we're relating and connecting, just like lots of communities of color have had, And I think it's in that work that we're also looking constantly to not be isolated, because the concept of isolation is not vague to us. Isolation is not benign. We see every day in our work that isolation kills people. Literally will drive people to end their lives, will drive people to massive addiction. Again, people we know and love, not vague people out there. And so how seriously we take isolation, how seriously we take finding each other is completely critical in our communities, because isolation is not something that is benign at all. And I think that again connects to how are we isolated or not isolated from the rest of the world. Many of us are queer immigrants that would say we're in exile from our countries, because we literally would not choose to be living here. But economically or because of homophobia, this is where we are. and this is where we're building. And so I think that, we hear this phrase in a lot of organizing. We hear it in a lot of academic places. Intersectionality. What does it mean to organize intersectionally? And to me, it's about engaging with fully what the world is, as opposed to asking that we do this sort of single issue work as if there's only one part of us, as if there's only one set of needs or longings or desires. And I think that we actually all have those. But I think the pressure has often been put on queer immigrant people, queer people of color, poor queer people of color, like, oh, you have all this stuff going on. We all have, quote unquote, a lot going on. It's about what we choose to engage with. And if we choose to engage fully in the world, or if we're choosing to, engage in bits and pieces and asking to not bring our whole selves, but just bring one part of what the fabric of our lives are. And the last thing I think about that is, as songs moving into new plans, I think one of the things we've asked ourselves is, what is the responsibility of the privilege of living outside of the closet in this country in this time, when we have ancestors and we come from a legacy where people literally died so we could be here in this location, in this part of this country at this time. We have so much more space than so many people. And so many of our people in our communities, their childhoods and adolescences were so painful. They got enough money to leave the little town they were from and come to Atlanta or come to another city. And we're never wanting to look behind at the young people that are coming up, And we have to think about, what is our legacy? What are we going to tell them? We had this much space. We'd come this far. And what we asked for was to be able to get married like straight people, or be able to, do things that straight people have. No. What about, we wanted ceremony? I don't think there's anything wrong with, people wanting ritual and ceremonies around our children, around our partnerships, around our births, around our deaths. But what about, we wanted so much more than that. We wanted to be able to live with dignity on our terms, where we were able to be out, living fully as we engaged in new economic systems, new communities, new ways of connecting that brought the best of the traditions that we come from. So when I think about that, I think about young people in queer community all the time, and people that come after us, and what are they going to think about all the space we had and what we chose to do with it or not chose to do with it.
Yeah, I think that is the real choice that we're faced with as a community. And I think that one of the really interesting things about that is also like the kind of legacy and like truth that gets left, based on what we believe about ourselves and based on what we tell each other. And I think that that's the reason for me, like, why I've chosen to dedicate my life to doing movement work, because I'm like, I do believe in spaces that can transcend like individual interest and individual agendas, to say that we as a community, there's some shared longing, not just shared identity, because I think that a lot of the work that we've been reflecting upon, and like a lot of us have entered in some ways, both like our own personal identities, our own sort of collective communities, have been through sort of a shared identity, and say that, we have this, we believe the same thing, we prioritize the same things, like we have the same, in some ways, the same beliefs about certain things based on our shared identity. And one of the things that I feel like has been one of the most valuable lessons of doing political organizing for me is that you can choose to like organize only with people that you have a shared identity with, but what's most important to me is like the people that you're willing to build shared values with, right? And I think that that's the real, in some ways, like it's the real legacy of song, is like to be in like both like to make sort of strategic interventions around conditions and around dialogue and around like helping to sort of create a political critique, right? And not just based on like reacting off of conditions, but actually create and be helped to articulate some of the best thinking in the region around connecting issues around gender and sexuality, connecting some of the best strategies, connecting some of the best I think structure that gets built out of those strategies. But I also think that there's something really concrete to building shared values and say, not only do we have this in common, but we're willing to fight for the same thing, and we're willing to sort of walk the same path and walk it out. And, I know a lot of folks who, are constantly asking themselves the question of like, like who's gonna come when, like when I'm having a really hard time, like who's gonna come when like I'm going through a breakup, who's gonna come when I'm, when I, like when me and my lover choose to leave a relationship. And I think that I am never going to be I think that there's never going to be love in my life again, you know, and like this real